I don't know about the rest of you, but I heard nothing.
I heard
Okay,
nothing.
let's do it. Technical difficulties. Start again.
Thank you, Sammy.
Yeah.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well done. Thank you, Sammy. School bell.
Sorry, guys.
Okay, with the bell, we'll have a roll call.
That's tough. So I've got Mayor Smith is present.
Well done. Thank you, Sammy.
Councillor Alexander is here. Councillor Blaine will be joining us later. Councillor Bell. Councillor Lehman is present. Councillor McConnell is present, and Councillor Fox is present. We do have a quorum.
Thank you, Sammy. So I just want to make sure everybody remembers we are being recorded and we're going over live. We ask the public to get any requests in for public comment by 3 o'clock today. We do have one written public comment that was included in your packet from J.B. Baldwin. So I want you to be aware of that. The meeting was moved to this week because we initially only had one item, and that was the appointment for the planning commission. And so rather than have two separate meetings, I opted to move it to this week. And then fortunately, we ended up with another item. So we'll have a short council meeting and then we'll go into the work session. So the council meeting will cover 2 action items and a quick report from city administrator. So I hope that wasn't too disruptive, that we didn't have to meet last week, and we'll put it all together this week. And I'm going to try to be cognizant of your time and our staff's time. If we can do something like this and we do have a light agenda, we'll try and combine things. With that, I'll ask for an agenda review.
There's no changes to the agenda.
Thank you. Do we have any citizen testimony signed up?
Just the written testimony that was included in your packets from J.B. Baldwin.
Thank you. Are there any responses from any of the city councilors? Seeing none, I'll introduce Robert Killen as our special guest. He has a presentation from the Lane Small Business Development Center. Welcome, Robert, and thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Much appreciated. Council, thank you for allowing me to speak tonight on behalf of my vision for the future of businesses throughout Lane County and here in Coburg. Of course, I'm Robert Killen. I'm the director of the Lane Small Business Development Center, and I'm a very happy resident of Coburg. Tonight, I'm going to ask you to help me solve a problem. It's a problem that's been repeated by business owners across the country for decades, which is this. The complaint is, when my business needs help, I can't find it. And it doesn't matter if they're talking about finding funding or finding help with regulation or just business support in general. The common complaint is that they simply can't find it. They don't believe it exists. But here's another truth, that there is no roadblock a business might face that doesn't have someone whose job it is to help them get through it. And those would seem to be in conflict, but they are two realities that we have to figure out how to face. In the big picture, we don't suffer a lack of resources for business. We suffer a lack of belief in those resources. And that's what we can fix. And here's how. At the SBDC, we've built a very simple searchable database called Lane Business Link, and it is nothing more than a place to house all of the known entities, public sector and nonprofit entities that directly support businesses in Lane County. And while it does exceedingly well as a client-facing tool, the greater value is on the agency side. So if you can imagine somebody calls up to the city and they're asking for help about government contracting. If there's nobody at the city who knows where to send them to get help with that, what's going to happen? And chances are nothing will happen. And that business is left believing that the help doesn't exist. And a business owner will only knock on maybe 2 doors before they give up. So with Lane Business Link, which is the tool that I'm describing, as resource partners use the tool to help businesses, we will collectively, as resource partners throughout the area, increase our understanding of and confidence in the enormous array of supports that we collectively provide to businesses throughout our region. With that, we can change the narrative from, when my business needs help, I can't find it, to when your business needs help, we'll help you get it. That's all I'm asking for tonight. I'm not asking for resources. I'm not asking for money. I'm not even asking for time. I am asking that the city do 2 things. The first is be a partner in this process, which means to have a page in the tool, and I can show it to you tonight if you'd like, but I'll send you a link so that you can explore it on your own. That you utilize the tool when people call you, that the city uses the tool, and ultimately that you embrace this new narrative that no matter what a business brings to us, we believe that there's somebody that can help them, and we're going to help them connect with that entity. So that's what it means to be a Lane Business Link partner. The second ask is more direct, and that would be a statement of support from the city, whether it's from you, Mr. Mayor, or from someone on city council, or from Ann. But in order for us to actually change the narrative, then collectively, the agencies associated with this, and currently there are 50, I would expect that to grow to 80 to 100 within the next year, that collectively, if we as business resource entities can agree in an abundance mindset that when businesses need help, we know that there is somebody that can help them, and we can help them connect, we can change the story. And frankly, it would put us at the top of the list. Lane County could be a world-class business resource region if all we do is change the narrative to one of abundance. And I'm asking for your support in that effort. Thank you for your time.
Robert, I had a skip in your first point. I missed it. What is your first?
The first ask is to be a Lane Business Link partner. And what that means is to be present in the database. And I'm working with the city on putting that together. And it also means to utilize the tool as a resource partner. So, it would be on your desktop when somebody calls up and you need to find a solution for somebody, that you simply use the tool and that you embrace the narrative. Those are the 3 pieces of being a partner, that you embrace this abundance story.
Thank you, Robert. I believe you already sent me a link, but are you going to send it out again to?
I can send that. I'll send it to Sammy and she can get it out to everybody. I can also put it in the chat right here, but I'll make sure that Sammy gets it for sure.
Thank you, Robert. Appreciate it. Are there any questions from the counselors?
I can see Patty.
Patty McConnell.
Mine isn't a question, but just a comment. I just Googled it just right now on my cell phone, and it comes up with a lot of information. And I just want to say, I wholeheartedly support this. Being a graduate of the Small Business Development 3-year program many years ago, and how much benefit I got from that, I heartily approve of this. I don't know what we need to do to formally acknowledge this, but I'm 100% in favor.
Thank you, Patty.
Any other counselors? I certainly agree with it, and I'm more than willing to write a letter of support and encourage the city to participate in this, because I believe that one of the biggest issues is for most of us with any aspect of our work or life is there's information out there, but it's so hard to find where it is sometimes. And that's amazing in the 21st century with computers and Googling. But when it really gets down to something that you need, how do you filter that down to what you need? And so I really support what the narrative is here. And I have not been able to look into the link itself much, but I certainly support the process and thought that is in this.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks again, Robert.
And
Ann.
Sorry, my mute button moved. I just had a question, Robert, as if there's a deadline you're looking at for us to respond with our report statement and get information for a page for you.
great. Thank you for asking that. I should have mentioned, I am launching a partner summit. So this is going to be a gathering, a virtual gathering of as many entities as I can. My hope is for 50 on the 10th of December at 10:30 in the morning. And Ann, I'm pretty sure I've just sent you a save the date on that. My hope is to have as many testimonials as possible before that event so that they can be shared as part of the event. And of course, hopefully somebody from the city can be present at that as well.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? Statements? Okay.
All right.
Thanks again, Robert.
Thank you.
City Administrator's report.
Okay. Well, thank you. Again, we only had one thing for the agenda for tonight until we had to add one. But first thing I wanted to mention was don't take the idea that there's only one agenda item on there, that there's no work being done. The staff is slammed right now with actually follow through to things that you have already approved as counselors. So the financing piece, we just signed final papers on the bond purchase today. And we just received the DEQ information for a payoff and a loan amendment from them, which is in with legal right now. Our legal just reviewed it today. We have the I-5 bore going right now. So lots of things that you've approved are happening, and it's taking a lot of, some of these things are a lot of pieces that have to be pulled together. And so yeah, we had a short agenda this week, but we have a lot on our plate, just getting the execution of lots of things. So the well purchase, we will be signing papers. The well property purchase will be signing papers this Thursday on that. So that's a very exciting deal to wrap up. And then we will start with the well development piece. I don't know how much that you were able to read in the city administrator's report, but I'm happy to answer any questions, or there are staff supervisors here that can also answer questions if you have them. John.
So on the handicap parking spot on Johnny Diamond Park, was that too steep? And if so, by how much?
Frank, can you answer that? Are you there?
Yeah, so it was supposed to be no greater than 2%, and the slope was anywhere from 2.4 to 3, I think 3.7%.
So that's a shame. They'll have to tear out all that concrete and redo it.
Yes, sir.
I feel bad for the contractor. He did such a nice job on everything in that park, and I guess there's not much leeway. You can exceed the specifications because someone could slip or fall, or the van can roll or something like that. I would assume it's a liability.
That's correct.
And it sounds like he disagrees with the conclusion, though. Is he now of a mind to willingly change the slope?
I don't know if I'm able to speak to that or not. I haven't heard anything back from the contractor.
So we did issue a letter to the contractor with 10 days to respond back to us with some ideas of how they would, if they had any recommendations on how they could approach or fix it. We haven't heard anything from them so far. So that letter was mailed last week. So we'll wait for the end of the 10 days and then we will then move forward from there.
And
So
the
we
other,
don't know if there'll be an additional cost.
There should not be an additional cost to the city, but these things have a way of not always working how we want them. So, but at this point, there should not be an additional cost to the city.
and then also on the 2 wells that are going to be decommissioned, were they thought to be at one time a well that would be supplying water to the city and just never worked out?
I'm gonna let Brian answer.
One well had high nitrates or showed signs of high nitrates. And the other well, honestly, I can't speak to. It's been abandoned for many years, and now the setback requirements, we wouldn't meet those there. And neither one we would meet setback requirements.
Counselor Alexander?
Counselor Alexander.
Yeah, on the 2 wells that we're abandoning or we're not going to use, is there anything that we have to do to plug those or put those away or shore them up?
That's been addressed this last week.
So is there any cost to the city for that?
Yeah, we I think that came to you last month. Jones Drilling did the work. It was about $10,000 per well.
Oh yeah, I did see that. Okay.
We have to do a little bit of work, some cleanup work that we're responsible for. So we'll be doing that hopefully sometime in the next couple days.
Okay.
Other questions from counselors? And maybe it might be a good time to just summarize our COVID response in the city hall and how we're going to deal with that after the governor's orders.
Thank you. So I will be sending out, I signed an administrative order today, and it's in response to both the governor's orders or guidelines that were put out last Friday, but also there were new OSHA temporary rulings that came out that became effective on Monday. It very much strengthens the requirements of workplaces to be making sure that their staff are working in their own spaces, that there's masks worn, that City Hall and all city properties are properly cleaned. there's some milestones we have to reach with some deadlines, reports that have to be written, and we didn't get much notice for this. So basically, from now until December 2nd, we do have staff that will start working from home. There are always essential staff at City Hall that need to continue to work. But the other piece is that we will be locking the doors on City Hall. It won't be open to the public. We will be open by appointment, and if people call, they can email us, they can call, we will help them. But at this time, with the increase in COVID-19, I have a very lean staff that has stayed very healthy up to this point. And I need to make sure that that continues to happen. So my first and foremost worry is about my staff, and just one of them getting sick and being in City Hall could devastate us as far as getting work done at the city. We have been so very careful up till now, but I just feel like with the governor's guidelines that this is the time to be extra vigilant. And we are extending the City Hall lockdown till December 31st. Part of that is while the governor's only goes to December 2nd, there are some milestones and reports and all those things that we have to do with staff that goes far past that based on OSHA requirements. So I will be sending out a copy of the administrative order to the council, and it will be brought to you in December and in your packet. But I'm happy to answer any questions that you have about that. Just right at this time, we don't anticipate that any staff are going to be furloughed. We're trying to make sure that those that can work from home have work to do. And just trying to make sure that we are staggering. People are working in their own areas, and we are limiting the coming and going to City Hall.
Thank you, Ann. Questions? I see Councillor Fox.
Do you have contingencies if or more than likely that it might be extended?
We'll just extend, yeah. So we extended the order through December 31st with anticipation that we personally think that could very well happen. So, so that is one reason why we went ahead and extended it through the 31st.
Councillor Alexander?
Are we going to have to sideline any projects? Or are we on schedule?
Right now we're on schedule. We are noticing that things are starting to slow down. And that when you're working with other agencies, everybody's trying to do the same thing, keep their staff working. But there are other agencies that have reduced their staff, and so they're working a lot slower. And so we're trying to keep everything on track, and so far it is. So we don't have much that's behind. So, but it is, we'll just see how it goes.
Councillor McConnell?
And do you have a way of getting a bulletin of some sort out to the community to let them know about the changes so that you don't have people pounding on the door and being upset because they can't come in?
Yes, so we did, I believe there's a social media post that went out this afternoon, and we will continue to put it out. The utility billing won't go out until after the governor lifts the 2-week, so we can't put it in there. We definitely have a note on the front door, and probably we could put something at the post office as well if we haven't already. Sammy may have already done that. So
that'd be a good idea. Okay, thanks.
Councillor Alexander?
Is it affecting any other areas of the city or the offices mainly? Are you closing parks, anything like that?
The only part of the parks that we're closing are the bathrooms, because the OSHA requirements require that we clean them twice a day, and we don't have the capacity to do that right now. Our public works staff is just slammed. So the option is then you lock them up, and so that's what we will have to do.
Any other questions or statements? Okay, thank you, Ann.
I
Move
just
forward.
have one more thing, Mayor.
Go ahead,
that
Ann.
I should mention as part of this is that all public meetings will be held by Zoom. There won't be any public meetings inside City Hall through the December 31st. And that's all I have.
All right, thank you. We're going to move to our action items. The Kennedy Jinks Wastewater Engineering Professional Services Contract. Brian.
Good evening, everybody. This is kind of a formality, bringing this to you. We've talked, I think we talked last month at the council meeting about updating the facilities plan, so we could kind of give people idea and direction about capacity of the wastewater system. So Kennedy and Jinks needed a contract to do that work. It's kind of a not to exceed $10,000. So this is a formality, just bringing this to you. And Ann's added in there the sections of ordinance number 91C. And I think it explains how we can bring this to you in this manner. Does anybody have any questions?
Seeing or hearing no response or questions, I'll entertain a motion.
I move, whoop,
Go ahead.
okay. I move that City Council approve the contract with Kennedy Jinks to provide wastewater engineering professional services to the city of Coburg and enact section 7A and B of ordinance number 91C, allowing for special solicitation methods and exemption from competitive award.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilor Bell with a second by Councilor Lehman to approve the Kennedy Jinks project to provide wastewater engineering professional services to the city of Coburg. All those in favor, please wave your hand in front of the camera and say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Any abstentions? So the contract passes unanimously. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, everyone.
Rolling back. Planning Commission appointment, Megan.
Good evening, councilors. Good evening, Mayor. I have before you tonight the reappointment for 3 planning commissioners, Jonathan Derby, John Marshall, and William Wood. All 3 terms expired this past October, and if reappointed, would expire in October of 2022. They're 2-year terms. All 3 commissioners currently meet the criteria for the Planning Commission. And let me know if you have any questions.
Any questions or comments from councilors? If not, I will entertain a motion.
I so move we accept the agenda for planning commissioners as presented.
I have a second.
Second,
Mayor,
Oh.
I'm sorry, and Gary may need to help me with this. So they need to recommend that you appoint the planning
Oh,
commissioner.
yeah.
Yeah, we gotta go through that. There's a recommended motion in the paperwork.
yes,
Thank you.
I move to recommend Mayor Smith reappoint Jonathan Derby, William Wood, and John Marshall to Planning Commission for 2-year terms expiring October 2022.
Counselor Alexander seconds that. So I have a motion by Counselor Bell to allow me to appoint the 3 said members to the Planning Commission. Counselor Alexander seconds it. All those in favor, please wave your hand in front of the camera and say aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? It passes unanimously. Thank you, Megan.
Thank you.
And with that, any last statements from any counselors or staff? I will close this meeting at 6:33. Thank you. All right. Now we'll open a public work session. I'll call that to order for our build out scenarios. I appreciate the patience of our speakers. We got our business out of the way, so we'll start moving forward. I want to introduce Zoe Anton of the Urban Collaborative. We've met before with her. The build out scenario, I think pretty much did what I hoped it would do. When I sat down with them, I asked them to incite discussion. And I think we got an awful lot of discussion and input. It gives a lot of information, and it gives us some perspectives of what we have as far as the citizens and what they think of development in our community. I think there was some lessons learned for us about the education and some of the things that we need to look at in our development code and other areas of the city. There was lots of good points and lots of discussion about many different aspects. I find it interesting that, many citizens really don't understand the process of how development occurs and what the city powers are in development. And I think that's one of the things that we need to address as we move forward, is to educate both ourselves and the citizens, and then move forward with a lot of these ideas and see what we can do with development code, ordinances, whatever, to fulfill the vision and the hopes and dreams of our citizens and businesses in this community. So lots of good input. I believe Ann said that if you were to print this off, it would take up 66 pages. I have not been able to read all of them. I'm almost there, but it was a considerable amount of input. So with that, I'll introduce Zoe Anton for our build out scenarios presentation.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Smith, and thanks for having me back. I know that I presented at a city council meeting back in September, and I don't want to repeat everything that I went over then, but I do want to go over a few of the essential items just to refresh everyone about where these build out scenarios came from. Then I'd like to go through the survey results and looking at how the survey respondents rated all of the different scenarios. And then talk a little bit about yeah, what came out of that, what came out of all of the great feedback and comments that we received within that survey, and some potential next steps that the city could take. So I'm going to share my screen. Let's see, looks like I'll need to be given permission by the host.
I'm working on it here.
Perfect. All right. Sharing. Let me just go into full. Can everyone see that full screen? Great. So just a little bit of background. Coburg population for 2020 estimates was 1,295. That might have even gone up by now in late 2020, but that's where it was. Median age 41 and a half. And then housing value and rent and median income. And, why is that important? That just helps us understand what type of housing and what type of development might be best suited for Coburg when we started to think about the scenarios. So according to the 2020 utility billings, we had 475 residential units. So just doing that quick math, it comes to about 2.7 people per household or residential unit. And then if we look at the PSU projections, the projected population for 2044, so in about 24 more years, was an increase of 383. Let me just turn my little pointer on. So 383 additional people would be in Coburg by over 24 years. So that's not too fast of growth, but it does mean that using the math of 2.7, it does mean that an additional about 142 residential units would be required to house those extra 383 people. So again, that's 142 residential units over 24 years. And that's just kind of showing you the calculations of how we got there. So again, reminding you of the community vision statement. And I've bolded here items that help us think about how development happens. So some of this, it's hard to say what a warm atmosphere is. That's very subjective. But, we can say objective things about what is safe, what is historic, maintaining parks and green spaces, well-lit bike paths, a range of different housing options, keeping that small town appeal, preserving buildings, so that historic character, and a vibrant economic environment. And all of those elements really can be influenced in the way that something, physical development happens. So keeping this community vision statement from 2017 in mind, we also took a look at the current zoning districts, and then we chose 8 different settings, and these included the settings 1, 2, 3, and 4 were all in the residential or central business zones or districts. So that's these 4 here. And then 5, 6, 7, and 8 were highway, commercial, or industrial. And you'll see that 8 is actually outside of the current city boundaries, and that's because it's potential to be annexed. So we looked at that as well. So just as quickly run through an example so you know what people looked at on the survey, they saw in existing conditions with the current zoning, so your height, maximums and front setbacks and lot coverage. Then they saw a couple examples of the existing conditions. Then we gave them scenario 1, and scenario 1 in each setting was always a lower density option. And then we gave some options of what that might look like. And then scenario 2 was always a little bit higher density, not crazy high density, but always it was higher than scenario 1. And we talked about what that would mean for housing and commercial, and we always put in parking. And so what you're looking at always prescribed to your current zoning code. So the parking there does meet your parking requirements for this type of development. And then we gave some images of what that could look like. So in this just happens in setting 2, scenario 2, we had a grocery store on the main street, and then we were also showing some townhomes. And so those are just 2 examples of what kind of the row house townhome could look like and what a 2-story grocery store on a main street could look like. So with that in mind, the survey results, we had 208 respondents, which is really impressive for a city of your size. That's 16% of the population, which is really statistically significant. So you can, take these scores as an indicator of what your residents like or dislike. And that can really help you steer on the way forward. So it's not like we got 15 people to respond. This is a great response rate. The highest scoring scenarios were tied, setting 3, scenario 2, and setting 4, scenario 2. And we'll look at those in more detail, but if you notice right off the bat, both of those are scenario 2, which I already told you was always the little bit higher density solution or scenario, the option. So that's kind of also an indicator that those scored higher than any other lower density options. So setting 1, which if you remember was way up north, looking at scenario 1 there, negative was, hey, these houses aren't affordable. It was small lots, or it's going to add traffic. And positive attributes, we're thinking, hey, we really like the large lots. We like less density. This fits our small town feel. It matches our existing development, which it very much does. We literally photoshopped some of your development into this, and minimal traffic impact. So that scored an average of 2.16 with a standard deviation of 5.86. So that's just saying that while the average was 2, you had people who kind of went on either side at about a range of 5.8. Scenario 2, which didn't score well at all. So in this setting, the denser scenario actually scored much worse. It's too dense. We don't like townhomes, all the traffic that might be added. And then some positive was, well, it seems like it'd be very affordable. So adding affordable housing options and getting some business commercial space onto that street. So this was setting 1, and it is actually the only setting where the lower density scenario scored higher. Every single other setting, the higher density scenario scored much higher. So here we have scenario 1, low density at a negative 4.5, and the higher density as a 1.7. So trying not to think about the total overall score, but the difference between the 2 is quite big. So that's a good range. Again, and I won't go through all of the attributes each time, but we'll start to see patterns. So people, as we saw before, it lacks historic character, adds traffic, and that was kind of a comment on every single one. And we're even talking about the lower density, it's saying that it's going to add traffic, too much parking, and then, hey, positively, we need a grocery store. This actually, having downtown retail could reduce driving. It could actually reduce traffic because more people can walk to their grocery store instead of having to drive to get groceries. This is, and then scenario 2, maybe it's too urban, maybe it adds more traffic, and then all the positives were, again, reduces driving, supports local businesses. This opportunity for mixed use development was a theme that people tended to really like over time. And this, some people said it does maintain the small town feel by giving you a main street. And it provides more housing options. So, you know, townhomes give a little bit more housing options than the larger lot houses that are the majority of Coburg. So setting 3, scenario 1 was looking at putting more parking in downtown. That was a negative 2.6. This scenario 2 looked at creating, and Coburg actually had a study done already on this area here, which was putting a little bike support station for the scenic bikeway that goes through, and then a little outdoor, probably seasonal outdoor cafe there. So we just put that in, and that came from a study that Coburg had already done. And then putting a little bit of development here to frame your park that's north. And that got a positive 2.4. So this was one of the highest scoring scenarios, and people tended to really like this. Setting 4, and these two are very similar. One has just parking in front, and one puts the parking in the back. So this one kind of takes away from the street and the pedestrian environment. And scenario 2 frames the street, makes a little bit more comfortable feel for the pedestrian as they walk, and takes cars and puts them in the back. And what's good here is we often hear that, you know, we need parking in front of our building, all these things. And here we really see, you know, here's a negative 2.6 and a positive 2.4. So that's kind of an interesting finding where we took literally the same density and just, you know, flipped the parking, and you can see that it made a big difference for people. Citing 5, now we're getting into the highway commercial areas. Scenario 1 looked at putting a few things next to the street because your code requires that, which is great. And then backfilling with just some mini storage, which is pretty common in highway commercial areas. You know, negative, this isn't part of our historic character. You know, we don't want more fast food, those kinds of things. And then some people thought, yeah, we actually do need storage, maybe. Scenario 2, put some more commercial along there to hit the highway commercial. And then put actually more of an industrial use in back to kind of hide it from the main road, but still allow for that. And people tended to like this one a bit more. So a span of, you know, about 2 points between, or 2.5 points between those. But people tended to think that was a more appropriate use for this site, and they liked that it provided jobs. But there's, you know, a little bit of fear that there might be noise from manufacturing, although there is manufacturing and things already here, and big trucks. And again, just this reoccurring theme that we've been seeing, that it doesn't meet the historic character of the city. So setting 6, and this is along, you know, Coburg Industrial Road there. This is a negative 9 for, this is a very typical kind of highway, big box kind of mall, big box retail along the highway. We see these in Woodburn, for example, with lots of parking in front. And then scenario 2 here, which scored better, was a little bit, same amount of parking, exact same amount of parking, but it takes and frames the street, puts the parking in the back, and then in this one we added mixed use. So this one has a little bit of hotel in it and things like that. Setting 7, now we are across I-5, so we're on the other side in the industrial area on the east side of I-5, still within the city boundaries. And this was just expanding what you already have. So we basically just showed expanding what was already there, which is parking and some truck parking and maybe another food place if it ever was expanded. And people didn't seem like we actually needed that. The negative attributes there, which scored negative 1.1. And then scenario 2, we made it a bit more hotel-y and tucked all the parking toward the highway. So this is I-5. We just put all the parking against the highway and kind of tried to make this more inviting of a place to come in. And some people thought, I mean, it did score higher. Some people thought that it did, providing hotels and lodging was a good thing. It keeps traffic on that side away from the rest of the city, helps build your tax base, and then continues having that green space there with a lot of buffer space, which we wanted to maintain. But of course, there's some negatives. So we don't need or want another hotel. There could be some safety concerns, and it's not walkable. And that's fair. You can't really get across the bridge to the rest of the town. So it would be just serving the highway users.
Yeah.
In the last setting, which is still outside of the city boundaries at this point, but would be zoned industrial if brought in. Scenario 1 is just very typical industrial. So we literally took some of your existing industrial and plopped it down there. So you can kind of see some of your existing that we probably replicated right here. Lots of parking, some randomly placed buildings. It's pretty typical industrial development. So negative 1.6. And then this one also still negative, but higher, a higher score. So only negative 1.08 was still industrial, but just designing it a little bit more efficiently. So here in this scenario, we get a lot more floor area. So the FAR, the floor area ratio, is a lot higher for the same amount of land. And yet we're still able to get the amount of parking in. This is tuck-in loading base. So the trucks wouldn't be coming in and out of the entrance of buildings. They would actually be tucked in, and still maintaining this green buffer between some of these larger farms out here. And you'll see that on both of the scenarios, we left the green buffer. So those are the 8 scenarios. Any questions on those results?
Going back to
I have a question.
Sure.
I'm just wondering,
Go ahead, Councillor Fox.
I was just wondering, with some of the, a picture paints 1,000 words, and it's an old magician's trick called palming, and I'm not suggesting that, but I based it on some of the suggested photos, and I voted that way, and the outcome was similar to the way I voted. I would just hope that if you voted based on some of the pictures that are in the people's minds, and given the amount of participation, that the end result embraces some of that assumptions. And that's a big stretch.
Absolutely, and that's where our recommendations really come in. So making sure that we really take into consideration that form. So what form, and that means kind of the built environment around us. Do the residents of Coburg want to see? And you're exactly right. Those images, an image does so much more than looking at just a bunch of words on a page or even an aerial image. And so I definitely think that's something that the city should think about when moving forward for code reform, and how you would be able to amend your zoning code or some type of design code for the form of those different districts.
Okay, I see Brandy has a comment, and I saw Councillor Alexander, but we'll let Brandy go first.
Thank you. So I also agree with what Councillor Fox said, and I have the same concerns. But I was also just wondering about what the decision process was for determining scenarios 1 and 2 for each of the sites. If you could speak a little bit about that.
Sure. So we really went with kind of status quo, lower density, and then a higher density option that met the requirements of Coburg. So met the zoning code, but also helped us get to the housing needed by 2044. So making sure we had enough, the amount and the right mix of housing options, as well as the amount and right mix of employment and commercial development to facilitate those people being able to be in Coburg.
Councillor Alexander.
I just had a question to see if because I don't have this in front of me, your screen, obviously I see your screen, but how can we get these figures?
So all of this is in the final report, which the city has.
Okay.
And then of course you also have the raw data, which you saw.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Is any of those buttons up there?
So one of the things that I looked at when I started really working toward getting this done was that picture's worth 1,000 words, because throughout my history with Coburg and dealing with planning, you try and describe or talk about something and people don't get the picture. And it doesn't matter whether it's city development or building a cabinet for somebody. So I think these pictures were a good starting point for a lot of discussion. And you certainly look at the different scenarios, particularly in setting 2, I believe it is, next to City Hall, where the general dollar store is illustrated, and then the other option, I think was one of the highest scoring. Well, I don't think anybody in Coburg wants a general dollar store, so that kind of gave leeway toward the other scenario in that setting. But it also did something that I was really hoping to get our community to experience, is the fact that that building can be built in the city of Coburg per our development code and zoning and everything else. And that's the issue that I want to address, is to look at these things and see things that we really don't want and
be able to
deal with them. So that's a part of the ongoing discussion after this.
Right. And I did want to show some of the renderings that we did here. So this is setting 2, as you just described, existing conditions. So you can see that that's just a picture taken with City Hall there in the background. And then we just simply placed different types of development in here. And so, here's the first one. And it's just, literally adding the street there. And that building exists on the other end, right? So actually that's just farther south on this same street. So we just placed that same building there. You could see what that looks like. Then we looked at something a little bit more modern with some glass on it. And then we just looked at another type with maybe the ability to have an outdoor cafe or something there. And I think this type of thing can really help the residents understand, if all of these have the exact same thing, right? Every single one is built to the same setback. So in a as far as the zoning code, all of these would be allowed. But, even that, what type of development do we want to see? How big of sidewalks are going to be really comfortable? Do you want to say that development on this main street should have 10-foot sidewalks because it just makes sense for a main street, or is a 4-foot or 5-foot sidewalk okay? That kind of thing is also possible to put into a zoning code.
So one of the other aspects that I've learned in Gary Darnielle was probably the one that taught me was the issue of development. The city doesn't necessarily decide that this is going to be developed. The owner of the property, and thus the developer, makes that decision. It's their property, and they decide that this is going to be a financially worthwhile venture, and they put in their application and build something. Where the city steps in and the citizen input is the fact that once they put that application in, we basically, our hands are tied to what our code and development code and zoning says they can do or can't do. If that isn't in there when they put that application in, we can't stop them. And so that's a big part of this issue, that we need to look at these things, learn what we don't want, and make sure we build our code to meet that need that our community wants, so that a developer can't come in and put a building like the Dollar General store in when obviously most of the people that responded to this did not like that. And thus we should not be allowing that in our city. And that's where this needs to go. We need to get that next step and start writing our code to answer these dislikes and concerns that we have in our city.
So I did, following on that, Mayor, I do think a lot of what you just said that reading the actual comments can really help you. I found it enlightening and very actually, it's so great that people took the time to write out their thoughts. It was really helpful. But this is just simply a collection. Obviously not all of them by far. There's, as we said, like 70 pages. But I looked through some of the general comments and tried to kind of categorize them and take out a lot of the ones that were really, really similar. And the big categories that came up that people seemed to feel very strongly about were Coburg's identity. Lots of comments on, how do we have a place that's pleasant, friendly, historical, and still rural with growth, right? Like, we know it's going to grow. How do we have a place where people come and relax and shop and eat and enjoy, but keeps this unique identity of Coburg? So that was a really big one. Having housing and mixed use was a really big theme that came out. So people want more families in mixed use. They think that is what good growth looks like. And that's a really important thing to think about as your city grows. Mixed use is the way of the future. Having a mix of low and high density housing. Lots of comments about just this need for mixed use, and really a mix of housing types came out. And I think that's something that you can definitely look at to see, how that would work for Coburg as it grows.
And one of the things, go ahead, Zoe.
People talked a lot about planning and development codes, which is something like I care about, but not everyone thinks is important. And it was so great that people commented on these. So, hey, we need to make sure our code language is strong and supports what our vision is. That's really key. And that's why I always show that vision statement every presentation. Always go back to that. People want that, and they want the code language to make it happen. Here they kind of they're saying like, hey, maybe we should have a design charrette for every single bit of development. Now that's a bit harder to do. You have to convince the developer to do that. And that can be something that they might not want to spend their money and time on, but it's an idea. And then just more about like, hey, let's get some measurable code criteria that supports our goals. Traffic and parking was a major theme. How can we grow without increasing traffic and without, having to just fill our town with parking? Or not having enough parking. And these things, again, it's not that more population equals more traffic. That's just not true, right? The bigger a city is, actually usually the more walkable a downtown is, and the less cars there are in a downtown, because actually you can just walk to everything. You don't have to drive. So it's not a direct correlation of more people equals more traffic. So there's ways to develop a mixed use neighborhood where people could live and walk to their daily needs, and actually you have less traffic than before. And then trees and green space, people, and this comes from your vision as well, this desire to incorporate trees, incorporate green space, making sure that you don't just pave every piece of the downtown. So those are some big themes that came out of the comments. And then that kind of leads me into our recommendations for the city's next steps from these studies. So continuing to engage residents as new development occurs will be important, particularly around design codes. So thinking even more than just setbacks and lot coverage, but even maybe we look at, this is a recommendation 3, maybe you look at considering developing a form-based code for certain districts. I don't recommend doing a form-based code for your whole city, but form-based codes for maybe the central business district or any other neighborhoods where there might be a lot of new development occurring. Thinking about maybe doing a form-based code for just that district could be really beneficial to help meet your goals.
Could you explain form-based codes?
Absolutely. So the Euclidean zoning, which is our traditional zoning code, focuses mostly on uses. And that comes from a long history of, don't put industrial right next to someone's house. They're going to suffer from pollution and noise, and it's going to be terrible. And so the traditional zoning is usually all about uses, and we see that a lot. R1, R2, R3, which is like larger lot residential, a little bit smaller, and like maybe where apartments go, separating all of those things by their use. A form-based code is zoning by form, by the built form rather than the use. So not worrying as much about whether, you're in a housing neighborhood that's just all houses, but maybe someone next to you or the house next to you is actually a lawyer's office. And you and your family live in the next house. And the house after that, is maybe, it looks like a single family home, but maybe it's actually a townhome and there's 2 units in it. So being able to have a neighborhood where there might be a 2-unit house, a single family house, and maybe a commercial like office or an accountant's office or a lawyer's office, and it looks the same. So having the form take precedence over the use, if that makes sense. And we see that a lot in really older cities, maybe not so much on the West Coast, but you see it a lot in older parts of town. So in Portland, for example, maybe an older part of town, you'll see that some of the nice houses have been split into 4, right? They still look like this nice Victorian house on the outside, but you can see 4 little mailboxes on the outside. Or you might see a sign that says, so-and-so, attorney at law. and they all look like these nice houses with front porches and things like that, but it's all different uses actually in there. So that's kind of form-based, is the built form over the use, and the Euclidean kind of traditional zoning is use over form. Does that help?
Yes, thank you very much.
Great. So our next recommendation was to really prioritize walkability and green space. Prioritizing walkability is going to help you combat everyone's comments talking about traffic. If you really focus on making a comfortable and vibrant public realm, you will get more people comfortable walking to what they need rather than driving 3 blocks to get to Main Street or things like that. So, and it sounds like people really like that green space, and so that's going to help it be a more comfortable pedestrian environment. So all these things actually really help reduce traffic. And a walkable downtown actually has been proven to generate much more economic return than a drivable downtown, because people walking by, they're going a lot slower. They look in all the shops and they're more likely to go in, and you get a lot more people per space than you do just one person in the larger car going by. So, and then one recommendation that's kind of the inverse of a recommendation, we did not find a need to expand the urban growth boundary at all. You have the population gain of 380 some people over the next 24 years. We found that you could easily accommodate that amount of growth in your existing urban growth boundary, both for housing as well as the economic and kind of commercial elements that would need to come along with that. And in fact, in doing that, people tended to like those scenarios much better. So not only does it fit fine, but actually people, it suggests that people like that better than the expanded lower density. So those are our key findings from the study. Any questions there?
I'm trying to expand my screen here so I can see everybody.
So,
Councilor McConnell?
So mine isn't so much a question as just a comment. Having served on Planning Commission back when we thought we had some pretty good code development, and to find out that there's some big flaws in it, and we could have something scary like the dollar store or Dollar General come in. How quickly can we move forward to get some good, solid code developed in our community?
So I will say that your current code has some really great things in it. You have set the right types of setbacks and frontage requirements for your main areas. So I do think it has a lot of good things going for it. And then I don't know about the pace of change. That's kind of out of my out of my knowledge for Coburg.
I see Brandy's hand up, but I'm also going to guess that for us to actually enact something that would come to the council, I would say 6 months is pretty aggressive, because we would want some good input on it. And it's a pretty heavy lift to take that on, and we would need staff support on it too. Mm-hmm. So, but there's a lot of work to be done. I think there's a lot of little things that we want to look at in the details now that we have so much input. So with that, I'll call on Brandy.
Thank you. And I don't know if this is an appropriate workspace for this question, but I'm just curious about the walkability aspect that you mentioned, because I know that traffic is kind of a huge issue in Coburg for a lot of our residents, myself included. we have a lot of traffic going through the town of Coburg on their way to Junction City, or even students, families driving their kids to school. I'm just wondering, how can we create that walkability aspect where it reduces our traffic flow? Because our town is not that big. Like, I've never considered there to be anything in the actual town of Coburg that I couldn't walk to. So that's just my perspective. But I was trying to figure out if there's some strategies we should be thinking about when we're deciding on walkability.
Definitely. So I haven't done or seen a traffic count for the main street there, but it is a county road. And, that's going to make it a bit harder for you to control. However, Lane County Transit, they do have a lot of good programs. Having worked with a couple other cities in Lane County, they will help you find funding for better crosswalks and, curb bulb outs that help to actually shorten the amount of street that a pedestrian has to cross. It also narrows the street, which forces cars to slow down. So slowing the traffic a little bit with natural calming things like a bulb out or more trees is one. Getting better and more crosswalks in is another one. So there's lots of natural things you can do. Besides, like putting bumps in, which you can't do on a county road, or at least not that I know of. It is a county road, so that's a challenge there. You can also widen your sidewalks. So making the sidewalks wider helps it be more comfortable for pedestrians, where they feel like they can be on a street that is high traffic, but be separated enough to be comfortable. And again, having more things like that next to the street makes the driver naturally slow down, which makes people more comfortable again.
We're also working on the bigger picture regionally, and Councillor Fox is our representative on the Lane Act. I'm on the Metropolitan Planning Organization, which is traffic funds that come into this region. And it's a very frustrating thing that we deal with because it is truly a regional traffic issue. It's not created in Coburg, but Coburg gets to deal with it. And we are talking with our regional solutions team out of the governor's office right now. We've been prompting that, but COVID, as Ann had mentioned, creates a barrier for us right now. But we are trying to get a regional look at this because this is Lynn County, this is Junction City, Harrisburg, Monroe, even Albany. Everybody coming through Coburg, they're commuting, coming down to Eugene, Springfield, or going the other way for their commute. And so it's a big picture in so many ways. And the little things that Zoe mentioned are one part of it, but the other part is just the sheer numbers are a regional issue that we're really trying to address. Right. And I had Councillor Bell question.
Yeah, I just wanted to speak to the same things. It isn't Coburg traffic. It's the main street, and it isn't just Willamette. It's as you go down Pearl also, and trying to get crosswalks, trying to have people obey crosswalks, that becomes a real issue for this town. And I think that's what the residents are really speaking to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's a tough one without doing a lot of the traffic studies, and maybe you have done this already to see how much of your economic activity comes from that through traffic, because there's always a risk, right? If you do get that traffic to go around, that you kill your downtown. which happens. I mean, that happens to small towns. So I'm not saying that would happen to Coburg. It's not necessarily true at all for you. I just didn't know if you'd been able to do that type of study to see how much of your economic activity comes from through traffic.
There certainly has been discussion
Yeah.
from the businesses. Councillor Alexander.
Should we be finding out from the county what we can do as far as what they own here before we start writing our new zoning regulations? What goes before the other?
Is that question for me?
Yeah,
Okay.
your advice.
I would say you should never just wait for someone else. They could, who knows how long that might be. I would say, be proactive, take your thoughts and ideas to the county. Say, hey, we're moving forward. Like this is what we'd like to do. What do you think? Are you with us? Join us. I would say definitely, don't wait. I would be proactive about it. And it sounds like as a council, you're involved with the county and you have contacts there. And just keep communicating and be proactive.
Okay.
I can carry that further. I'm going to ask Gary Darnell your input on that connection, if you can.
Sure. How do you want to see it happen? Going to the planning department, transportation department first, working with them, and then going to the commissioners?
And I would think that what we would probably want with the county is to parallel what we're doing, which is we would seek some planning input, discussion from the community, and then move forward. I don't know if the TSP and stuff would involve any of that.
Well, normally when you're considering the adoption of a new zoning ordinance that might affect other jurisdictions, you provide them with notice and invite them to participate with their input, which is a good opportunity because you have something for them, something solid for them to review at that point. But you haven't gone through the adoption process yet, so there's a lot of opportunity to make modifications to compromise.
Okay, thank you, Gary. Other comments or questions? Zoe, it's good information. I've got some comments of my own, the higher density housing and stuff. One of the kind of pet projects that I look at, or pet peeves maybe, is what I refer to as legacy housing. I've lived here long enough to where I've watched people that have lived here all their lives, literally. And then when they get to a point where they have to downsize, they're widows, widowers, or even couples that get into their 70s or 80s and can't take care of the larger yards, but would love to stay in Coburg, but they can't. Number one, because there is no small place that they can take care of. And number two, they usually can't afford it because it's a big lot and big property. So that's one of the things that I think I would like to see addressed in our future. It does help us toward a higher density, but give us an opportunity for young starting families or young couples and the legacy people that have been here all their lives and then have to move out because we can't accommodate them in our small town. The other part is the public realm and the green space, and Zoe will probably laugh because I really picked on that piece of property next to the Pavilion Park because that is the heart of our town. And I'm glad they stuck a parking lot in there because we got some comments on that. And that's what I wanted. I wanted people to realize that there could be a parking lot placed there.
Right.
It's a private lot and it's not part of the city park. Just like the Dollar General store, it's like I wanted those people to see that those things could be built there. And I want us to recognize that and see what we can do to make sure we don't hurt our public realm or our green space, that interaction area where like this summer, looking at the COVID issues. That park was amazing. We had to put extra picnic tables in there so that the diners could go over to the park and eat outside. But even during our music in the park and other things, it's just a great space for us. And I'd hate to see us let any opportunity go that we would lose that beautiful public realm area in the heart of town. So there's lots of aspects that we look at. Taking the recommendations from Zoe and the study that we've had here, I think we need to really look at possibly a committee, certainly public hearings, and a direction from the council down the road sometime as to what we want to do, because it will cost money to move forward with this. So I'm inviting any other comments now as far as direction and what you guys as council and citizens would like to see. Councilor McConnell.
So what I would not like to see is this taking time, unnecessary time. We could committee it to death. We could committee it long enough that we have a Dollar General in that parking space or in that space. I would like us to make a commitment to have a time frame to involve Planning Commission as soon as we can, and to have a statement and move forward. I don't know what that looks like, but I hate to see it go to a bunch of committees. And I think we have the information we need from our citizens. I think we know what we need to do, and I think we just need to move forward and do it as quickly as possible.
All right, thank you, Councilor McConnell. Councilor Fox.
Yeah, I agree with Councilor McConnell. I actually liked your idea of 6 months. I would hate to think of a finished product because there's so much going on in the world, let alone Coburg right now. But better to have a rough draft of a car with square wheels than waiting forever. So having something, setting a goal of 6 months. Every football team goes into the stadium to win a game. You may not get the game, but you got something as a result. And so setting that as the first barometer, and then setting it 6 months out or whatever, so that we don't end up committing it to death, like Councilor McConnell said, and we have some sort of product that we can refine would be desirable to me.
I certainly agree with that. We do need to move forward if we're going to do something. And I have some big concerns about some holes in our development code and zoning. Councilor Lehman.
Well, can we do an interim step where not necessarily a moratorium on our zoning codes, but if you're concerned that someone might come in to build something that the community doesn't want, and the code is still existing when they make the application, and if we're acting in good faith, we have to abide by the application process and approve it on its merits, unless we have some kind of interim moratorium that says we're in the process of revising our code, and that would put a stop to some applications that may not be in the city's best interest based on the survey.
So I'm going to take a stab at this, and then I'm going to have Gary Darnielle tear it all up. Again, my understanding is that whatever we have enacted in the development code and the zoning is what we have to abide by. So unless we change that, no matter whether it's an amendment or we said no, and it needs to be of legal standing to be able to say that, we can't just, I don't think we can say just no, we have to put it into the code. Gary?
Well, I think we were talking about a moratorium, and you can't legally, under statute in Oregon anyway, enact a moratorium, a building moratorium, unless you can show a deficiency in providing sewer or water. So, if an application comes in, you process it with the standards that are in place at the time the application was submitted. You don't have any legal choice. So that's one argument for moving forward as efficiently as you can with the changes you think you need.
And
So you
one of the
can't-
things I'll speak to Councilor McConnell and Fox. I totally agree. We don't want to committee this to death. But what I see here is we have an awful lot of information. And I think we need to get a group of people together to winnow this information out and pick out what we need to really work toward and then work toward it. And I don't know that we could do that without having a committee or a group of people that can sit down, look through this 66 pages of input from citizens and other input that we also have that goes beyond what the build-out scenario brought us, and then move forward. So I think there is a need for some kind of a committee aspect of this, but I totally agree. I don't want to go through 3, 5, 6, 10 committee meetings and rewrite every single syllable of our zoning code. So I think we need to take all that information and move forward.
You can certainly, after you set up the committee, give them marching orders in terms of the timeframes that they have to work within.
Councilor Lehman.
Well, of our existing code, what percent would need to be changed to achieve the goal that we're talking about?
That's a really good question. I think there's so many smaller points, but then the decision to go with, as Zoe mentioned, the form aspect of development versus what we have now, and deciding whether we want to use that could change that percentage aspect of it and maybe remove a lot of zoning wordage, ordinance wordage that we have.
I think you need to be very careful when you look into form-based or performance zoning. Fort Collins, Colorado changed their zoning code to performance-based years ago. They ended up junking it because the learning curve for developers was too severe. And they found out they had to approve uses that they didn't want to approve. The developer would come in, meet all of your standards, and put in something that a traditional zoning code, a Euclidean zoning code, wouldn't allow. I think the fact that we're looking at one district for the form-based makes it easier, but you still need to be very careful about what are the implications when you put it into effect. Make sure you have safeguards.
And I think that I can see the landmines around that, definitely, because we have the landmines with what we're using now, that we think we've covered everything. And I know Patty McConnell's going to start shaking her head that you go through this thing and you've gone through every little detail, all the minutia, and think you've got it covered. And then it gets passed, and a year and a half later, you see, oh my gosh, we missed this, and we didn't get that, and we forgot this. And after all that discussion, that's going to happen all the time. And so, again, we can't get caught up in snowballing and trying to collect every little possible detail to cover every little possible scenario. We've got to address the larger group things and see if it might be very finite definitions or descriptions of what we're doing, but we've got to be careful. So, Councilor Lehman.
So I know the design of the building, the setbacks, the parking, the physical kind of structure is a big portion of this process that we're looking to revise, but it almost sounds like it's more the kind of business that is the larger issue. And am I reading that correctly or not?
I think you could relate it to the kind of business, certainly. Anne was sharing with me, I believe that Sisters has a limitation of fast food restaurants. So national fast food brands, they actually limited how many of them could be in the city. There's all kinds of options. And so I saw you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was just gonna speak to that. Sure, I guess if every building for like 10 blocks was fast food, you'd probably want to limit that as a use. But otherwise, I would say that even a McDonald's, if told they have to obey certain things, they will build, a McDonald's that matches your design code. And I've seen it. I'm actually traveling right now. I'm in a hotel room. And I've seen it in the city where I'm in Monterey. I'm in Monterey, California. And there's a McDonald's that's built and it looks just like all of the other beautiful buildings along Cannery Row on their boardwalk. It's built right on the street. It looks pedestrian oriented. It looks just the same as everything else. And it just has the golden M still there. So I don't think it's about type of business. I think it's about how you want to shape your public realm.
And we've done a good job with the group that Patty worked with in the Planning Commission, where if you look at the residential, it goes down to how the windows are laid out, the size of trim, the porch and the elevation above the street level. So many of those things that we could build into the commercial aspect of it. I saw Anne, and then I'll come back to Councilor Lehman.
What I wanted to say was, you don't have to necessarily think about one huge planning development code change. I mean, it's okay if before we made a code change and then we held out one piece and waited and spent a little bit more time on that piece. So I think it would be reasonable to say we have some code changes to make. These are the most important, so we want to move forward with those. These ones we want to get to, and it doesn't have to be a major year-long thing to get to those most important things. Set some goals. I know that in the historic district, Henry was pointing out to me that, we're lacking some language in the historic district that really backs up what we want to see from the comprehensive plan. And so that there's a chance that somebody could go in and buy a house in the historic district, tear it down, or do things to it that's not the intention of the comprehensive plan. So those are those things that need to be fixed, that there needs to be some criteria built in some of the areas, but it could be in 2 or 3 changes that we set goals for what's the priority, what maybe can wait, but we do want to get it done, and just work at it and adopt what's the highest priority first. When I was going through a class with John Morgan, he specifically said that you have to really think about what's best for the community, and development code changes need to be made as often as you don't want to spend all your time doing it, but you don't also have to do one big humongous change and then wait 5 years and do it again.
Yeah.
So that's all I wanted to say.
Councilor Lehman.
Well, I guess where I was coming from is we heard Dollar General mentioned a few times tonight, and it seemed like when it came up, it was, well, we don't want a Dollar General here. So that's why I was saying, is it the kind of business, or is it more the community public realm that is driving the change? I've heard people in town say, they'd like to have an Ace Hardware. Well, I would, but is that in the general, what was the name of the other business I mentioned?
Dollar General.
Dollar General. Is that in the same business category, or is that more acceptable for an Ace Hardware versus a Dollar General?
It's It's all those things, and you can make it whatever you want. We have in our zoning that says we don't want truck stops. That's a type of business. But as Zoe said, we could ask, maybe the Dollar General is something that we want, but we just don't want the way that building looks, and we could make them make it look right. Counselor Fox.
Oh, well, that would be the key, is that we have the stipulations in place so that you don't end up with a Dollar General that looks like this big empty parking lot without any trees in it and this cinder block building. As Zoe pointed out, in Monterey, you barely can tell it's a McDonald's until you see that M. And in Vail, Colorado, they did the same thing back in the 70s. The golden arches were not allowed, and the building looked different. Inside, it was McDonald's, and it was the 70s. It wasn't as probably as conformed as the Monterey one, but by God, you didn't know you were passing a McDonald's until you saw that M in the window. So to get at Councilor Lehman's concept, it's not, you could limit certain businesses, but Ace Hardware would be great to have an Ace Hardware. Would it look like your general Ace Hardware around the country, or would it conform to a more 1930s look of a hardware store that Coburg would feel better about?
Councilor McConnell.
So that becomes, I think we could be here all night with that discussion. But I think what we heard from our citizens is that we don't want the big box stores. We don't want the big box look. We want it to be Coburg, where there's small businesses, they're independent businesses, they fit in with the community, they encourage staying in the community. A general store type thing would be wonderful to have, but a Dollar General, does that fit what this community wants? And I think we heard pretty loud and clear that we want to have something that is unique, historical, and community oriented. And I think that Anne's right. We don't need to write the whole code. We need to take, if we're worried about that one lot, particularly right now, and the parking lot maybe as a second priority, then let's work on those. Let's get that language taken care of so that we're not regretting that we just, spent the night talking about it and then didn't do anything. So
I agree, Councilor McConnell. I think the residential is pretty well taken care of. There are some holes in it, but you guys did a really good job, 18, 20 years ago with a lot of the detail on that. Councilor Alexander.
Just curious though, are there any algorithms that we can take from the comments, the data of the comments? Is there any way to get algorithms from that? We can read every one of them, and I've read a whole ton of them, and they're very similar, but is there a way to get an algorithm out of that?
So you could do a word syntax analysis. That would be one way.
That would help us at least move quicker.
And
yeah, that would be great.
Zoe, don't they have
Councilor Lehman.
software for that?
I'm sorry.
There's
Go ahead, Councilor Fox, and then I'll come to Councilor Lehman.
I'm sorry. I was thinking about that earlier, and you kind of informally went through it, and it sounds like, I assume go to the dentist and some of that stuff. Software that can scan and put them in the algorithms that Councilor Alexander was asking about. Cool. Let's do that.
Councilor Lehman.
Well, I like what Ann was saying in terms of narrowing this down and doing it in chunks. It seems like we all kind of know what we're talking about and thinking towards. Not that I like a real authoritarian approach, but I envision maybe 3 or 4 people hammering it out in a couple days to bring back a draft from, like what John was saying is, a car with square wheels is a good place to start.
Well, we need to start with
agree.
something and we could figure out if that's working or not and be able to adapt quickly. Councilor McConnell, you had a comment?
No, I just agree.
Okay. Because I know I have like 4 pages of notes of things that I think we need to look at. And like you said, John, we could come up with 3 or 4 people that are well involved and have some significant background or history that can help us get this list going and move the cart down the road.
If
So,
I would agree with Gary. I would not recommend, I'm a big fan of the form-based code. I do not recommend doing that for your whole city. Definitely, it's been proven to work best by district. And so a good place to start would be with your central business district. If that's where you're seeing some major gaps. And I also agree with Councillor Lehman that really with the amount that it sounds that you're familiar with the code and with the information that you have in your hands, I think in 1 week you could probably pound out some of the things to plug some of the holes that you're seeing. I think 6 months is a great goal for doing a bigger change. But I would recommend, if you're looking for just good basic standards, if you're looking for those ideas of those, what are the minimum things that we need to put into a code that gets us what we want? A really great resource is the Lead for Neighborhood Design criteria. It sounds kind of funny, and that's a rating system to tell you if you need silver or gold or whatever for their criteria. But they have an entire credit, for example, that's just called their walkability credit. And it has, I think, 15 different criteria in it. And it's really simple wording. It's like 15 sentences, each one a criteria. Simple wording that can really help get you thinking at least about the exact criteria that help you get the form that you want. And it's just things like, how much glass do you need in your frontage? How many functional entries do you need dispersed along a frontage street? Anyway, it's a great resource if you wanted like a quick, just some quick ideas for things, the minimum requirements that can help shape a public realm.
Councillor Alexander.
Can you say it again, Zoe?
Sure, it's the Lead for Neighborhood Development. So LEAD stands for Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. And that's put forward by the Green Building Council. And they have lots of criteria. So they have one for buildings and new construction. They have ones for interiors, but they have one for neighborhood development. And that one specifically they were able to, they had a team of literally hundreds of people working on it for years to try to drill down into what are the few criteria that really help make the difference.
Fantastic.
Okay. Yeah.
I just Googled it.
I just sent the link out to most of the councilors.
Thank you, John.
Great. That's awesome.
Okay. I think we have a pretty good plan to move ahead with our planning for planning. What kind of makeup would you like to see in this initial group of people? All councilors, planning commission members, citizens, staff? Any ideas? Patty McConnell.
Planning commissioner, city councilor, staff, community member. You said it.
And mayor.
And the mayor.
Well, maybe the mayor doesn't need to be in all of those meetings because he has 482,000 other things he needs to be doing. But
he has 4 pages of notes.
I do really good at writing my notes and then sitting back and letting everybody else do it. So a commissioner, a staff member, a counselor,
Community member,
and a community member.
or maybe 2 community members.
I would say, I mean, this is a totally, you don't have to pay attention to my opinion at all, but I always like to suggest someone who's a resident and someone who's a business owner.
That's a good idea. Yeah, it's a great idea.
Resident and business owner. How would we like to go about recruiting and selecting? Any ideas? Does anybody here
Nominate-
want to send a
nominate-
counselor forward?
I nominate John Fox or Patty.
Second that.
Do we have takers? Patty, John?
I would do it. I would do it.
You okay with that, John?
Yeah, I would do it, if 2 could be allowed.
Yeah, let's have 2.
Okay.
All right. And
Staff,
staff.
any takers?
Yes. I'd be very
Megan.
happy to work on this.
Yay.
We would be doing somersaults to work on this. But we also have Henry as well that can give support to that too.
Sure.
Beneficially.
I'll be glad to volunteer, Henry.
Well, Gary, you taught me well.
Well done, Grasshopper.
Thank you.
Business and citizen. Patty?
I would recommend Kathy Ingebrigtsen because she has a lot of knowledge about the history of the planning department or planning commission.
Yes, she does. I could ask a few business owners. I have a few in mind. I'm sure you guys do too, but if you have any recommendations,
I think Terry would be a good one.
obviously, but Terry's very good at saying, I'm really busy and no, thank you. I'd love to have him on.
I'm not, you can't see me. Can I speak, Mayor? Sammy?
I suppose. Go ahead,
Thank
Sam.
you. Seth, one of our planning commissioner, is also a business owner here in our, so something to keep in mind.
Yeah, he would be a great one.
Yeah.
And the mayor and I will be meeting with the planning commission tomorrow night. So we can definitely mention this and try to start building it into those priority goals that we will talk about.
I would perhaps also suggest Marissa Doyle. She is the Heritage Committee Chair. She's a planning commissioner. She's an architect, and she's very excited about being involved in the planning process.
That's a great idea.
Yeah. I think that would be a helpful skill in this group. We're looking at a committee of about 7 to 8 right now. So I think we have lots of good potential, and I agree with you. We need to move forward with it and maybe break it down by zone, the commercial versus residential or industrial. I think we've got a pretty good idea of what the big concerns are for our citizens, and we can see those pretty well. Thanks to the report that Zoe has presented. I'm sorry, Zoe. I have a niece who is Zoe, spelled the same way. So I think we've got some good information to move forward with. And Ann and I, as she said, will be meeting with the Planning Commission, and maybe they'll have some good ideas too. And we can get a couple people and then start moving forward with gleaning this information into something that we can work with. Are there any
Sounds
other
good.
comments from anybody?
I just question, do you want us to create a committee and bring it to that creation of the committee to council in December? Or is this something, and maybe Gary can answer this, is this something that could serve as a subcommittee for the Planning Commission?
Sure. If so ordered by the city council.
Yeah.
Or created by the Planning Commission itself.
Yeah, because we're basically a month away from the city council meeting. Maybe we can get the Planning Commission to do it so we can get to work.
Sure. If it's going to be a subcommittee of the Planning Commission, yes.
I will look into that, and perhaps we can talk about with them tomorrow night.
Excellent. All right, do we have anything else? I see Zoe. Thank you, Zoe.
I just wanted to thank all of you. It's been a real pleasure working with this council, and especially Anne and Megan and the mayor. This is a really forward-thinking city, and it's been really refreshing to work with you. And I really applaud your efforts for really going after the vision of what your community wants. And I think you're going about it in all the right ways, and it's pretty exciting. I'm excited to watch Coburg grow. So yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Zoe.
Thank you.
And
Thank you, Zoe.
I echo that. It's been a joy working with you to go around and get input, and you guys have been very responsive to our requests, and I really appreciate what we got out of this. So thank you, Zoe. Any other comments? Councilor Lehman.
So the ground next to the old city hall that is owned, I think, by Chuck Shepard, is that correct?
I believe so, yes.
He's just allowing the city to use it as park space. Has there been any thought to move forward to purchase that for the city to use as its park?
Well, I've certainly thought about it, but there's some steps that we would have to go through to even be able to do that. And so we do need to look at that, I think, and address that possibility. Because we don't, number one, a budget, where would the funds come from? And number two, I don't think it's in any of our plans to acquire that. So we need to make it a plan.
Yeah,
So
maybe he would donate
budget
it.
Oh,
Maybe he would donate. Wouldn't
you,
that be a
Patty.
tax write-off? It could be a tax write-off for him.
there you go.
Are you speaking of the big lot across from the park that he fenced in recently?
No, the one in the middle
No.
between Old City Hall and Pavilion Park.
Oh, okay.
That's not city park now, that's private property.
It's a gentleman's agreement that we mow it and take care of it, and they let us use it. It's been that way for, gosh, as long as the Pavilion Park has been here, I think almost 30 years now. We actually, the city used to own that, but we swapped the lots and took the outside one to the north and left the middle one. And we actually exchanged ownership on those lots so that we could put the park to the north end of that block. And I was on the Planning Commission when that happened. So, well, look, we need to make the plan and move forward with it, because I think that's a really precious site for our city that we need to look at.
Name it after him.
I'm okay with the name, as long as we get it.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else from anybody? Staff, counselors? I want to let you guys go tonight.
Thank you.
I think we've done great. A lot of information. So thank you very much. We're going to close this meeting. It's 8:01. I appreciate all your input, and we'll get back to you with what we find out tomorrow. Good night, everybody, and thanks again.
Thank
Night.
you.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye.
Happy Thanksgiving.